Welcome to Making Do in Hard Times, where we explore how to keep your digital presence up to date and relevant during this time of crisis. Twice a week or so, we will live stream conversations about how organizations are making do, whether that's working from home, publishing emergency updates, or operating on shoestring budgets. Topics will range from content strategy during emergencies to refreshing your website without having to upgrade your CMS. Today is April 23rd, 2020, and the topic is a question: pivot or accelerate? I'm Todd Nienkerk, your host and CEO at Four Kitchens, and our guest is Franz Hartl, Yale University Webmaster. Welcome to Making Do, Franz.
Thank you, Todd. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to be collaborating with Four Kitchens.
Thank you for the kind. Thank you. That's very kind. Before we dive into the topic of pivot or accelerate, some background. The title Webmaster. What does that mean these days? It's you don't run into it very often.
The University Webmaster. Well, I like the anachronistic aspect of that title. I like to kind of represent that this is something that is kind of a tradition that we've had here. This is Yale was one of the first 50 websites out there, and I have the pleasure of running this domain. And I want to kind of make sure that we're kind of keeping the sense that we are building upon something. And I think that's going to be a theme that we're going to talk about today. That a lot of the things I'm gonna get right to the answer right now. We're going to be accelerating, right? And what we're going to be accelerating is we're going to be accelerating things, and we're going to be that we've known for a long time. The open source values that we have here of community, collaboration, and freedom, right? These are values that are going to be really valuable to us in this time of quarantine and COVID-19, and we need to kind of stick by our values and push for them.
I love it. Okay, well, let's provide a little bit of background about how this question of pivot or accelerate came to be. So without giving away too much, we've worked together for a long time. Four Kitchens has worked with Yale for many, many years. We've been working with you for a long time.
No. That's an understatement. Four Kitchens has, since 2009, Four Kitchens has stepped in, and Four Kitchens has architected the kind of infrastructure that we call Yale Sites that runs the university. It's an excellent model, and now it's been copied by our peers. You see Stanford Sites, you see Columbia Sites, but that was created at Yale by Four Kitchens. And myself, I've been representing the Drupal drop. It's been my career since 2004. My living has come from that. And I'm just lucky that for the past 5 years, I've been able to run this machine that y'all designed.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So we have been working on, there's lots of things that we do together, but one of the projects that we've been working on is for a performing arts center on campus at Yale. Mm-hmm. And as COVID spread across the US and things started to get locked down, the construction of this physical space of this performing arts and community.
The Schwarzman Center.
The Schwarzman Center. The construction of the physical Schwarzman Center was put on hold due to everything that was happening and
right.
budgetary concerns. And,
right.
Maybe they're not calling it a recession yet, but let's face it, it's that or worse. So that was put on hold. But the web project that we were working on to accompany this was originally the first phase of it was intended to be very focused on the physical space. Things that happen in the physical space, the events, buying tickets, the student like food service, dining areas, things like that. But of course, with the Schwarzman Center construction being put on hold, that approach to the website didn't really make sense anymore. So a few weeks ago, we started talking about this idea of, we should pivot this, and we should pivot in the direction of, let's talk about what performing arts looks like online. What does a digital version of a physical performing arts space, how does that manifest online? And so that the original word was pivot. We were pivoting, but that word for you has changed to accelerate. So what's the difference between those two things for you?
The difference is pivoting means that we need to have new ideas, right? We need to kind of change our thinking. Some of our assumptions were wrong, and we need to change our assumptions. Accelerate means, these trends that we're having, we need to kind of recognize that we were actually heading in the right direction all along, and we need to move faster, right? So what is the Schwarzman Center? The Schwarzman Center is actually kind of the next generation of the Commons, and the building is still called the Commons. And the Commons is a kind of a very valuable word that people in the open source community should kind of recognize, even in the Drupal community, right? Drupal, one of the original taglines Drupal was community plumbing, right? Like it's about building community. The Commons was this space where the Yale community recognized we want to be able to have everybody come in and have a dinner or a meal together. And the whole campus could meet in this one grand space. But in 2020, the Yale community is a global community, and it's a larger, even on the physical campus, it's larger. And we needed to have a digital strategy that kind of came there. How do we globally convene people? And we partnered with the team, with your team, and we're kind of thinking about like a lot of these questions about convening people globally. And when we say that we need to kind of accelerate, because we were talking about laying a foundation, building on events, and then saying 4 or 5 years from now, kind of laying that infrastructure and saying, okay, now we could kind of do digital spaces, we could do kind of live streaming, we could kind of do some more machine learning, media and content sharing. But you know what? We can't wait 5 years to do that. I think universities, and this is not just Yale, universities need to kind of think what they're going to be doing for the next 18 to 24 months as this pandemic kind of continues, and what is our strategy for live streaming? What is our strategy for media and content sharing? What is our strategy for machine learning and digital analytics? And we need to kind of have that strategy, and we need to kind of implement it now. And people know what that strategy is, Todd. We've been talking about this. We've been talking about these ideas for decades now. You know, actually, Vannevar Bush wrote an article in the 40s called "As We May Think." You know, the person who kind of created the modern research university was talking about the ideas that we need to talk about today. So when I'm talking about accelerating, I'm talking about let's bring all these ideas and dust it off and dust them off and resubmit them, because you know now the audience is going to be more receptive to this. So when people are out there thinking about what to do in this crisis time, they shouldn't be thinking about, oh, I need to have new ideas. No, the old ideas that we've had in this community, it's time to push for them again, and let's accelerate. So things that we were planning on happening a decade from now, let's try to make them happen now.
Interesting. So pivot is a word that takes on a lot of meaning in the technology world, because it gets applied most frequently. It's like kind of a Silicon Valley startup. You know, we thought we were going to do this. Well, it turns out that isn't working, so we're going to go in this other direction, and it sort of becomes synonymous with just doing something different or taking a turn or whatever. Sort of a literal, you're standing in place and you pivot, you move in a different direction.
Right.
It's interesting to hear you characterize it as how pivoting has in the form of like a project or an initiative has this built-in idea of what we were doing before didn't work, and so now we need to do something else. But in fact, the world that we live in now, it's not that the things we have been doing up until now with our technology didn't work. It's that the world has changed around us, and so we actually need to like leapfrog over what we thought we were going to do in the next year or two, and we need to be thinking 3, 5, 10 years down the road. So that then is what you mean by accelerate, right? Take the phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 projects. Let's make that phase 1.
Yeah. Yes. So a lot of it was about, you know, in a university space, right? Like I have to be a little bit more sober in my university meetings when I'm a little up. I can't be this animated, or people like kind of kick me out and not take me seriously. So what you have to do is you have to kind of build trust. And what you do is by building trust is you're not pushing for something kind of grand and grandiose. You're pushing for like kind of the next iterative step. So you can say, we could accomplish events and calendaring because we've done it in the past, and we're just going to kind of make it a little bit more standardized and using existing kind of tools, and a lot of this to kind of slowly kind of build validation and work on a timeline that the university feels comfortable with. Now it's just, unfortunately, the world has changed around us. I like how you're phrasing that we need solutions for the fall, and you know what, this is not like just a Yale thing. This is going to have to be an open source community It's not even a thing where we need our peers or people who are watching this, they should reach out to me. They should reach out to you and say, how can we kind of collaborate, because we have the exact same kind of issues. And this is where we need to kind of figure out in ways that we could work together and bring our shared vision that we've had and bring it into reality sooner, because fall is going to be here sooner than we think, and we need to have answers. And not just for the classroom, but for kind of research.
Let's come back to that point, because it's interesting how there's very like well-worn ground now about, well, how do we take the classroom online? But that's not the only thing that universities do. But let's come back to that. When you and I spoke a little bit earlier, and we were talking about, things that are happening at Yale and some trends we see in higher education and all of that, you highlighted that what universities do best fundamentally is to collaborate, that they're really centers for collaboration. So that could be collaboration through knowledge, research, right? All, that and more.
We all talk all the time.
Yes, all the time. We write, we publish,
we talk. We talk about our vendors. We talk about
exactly. Let's have a meeting about it. So, so collaboration then. Yeah. So taking that idea of collaboration, like open source has always had a really strong presence in the higher and education in general, but particularly higher ed, probably because of the spirit of collaboration and open knowledge and all of that. How do you see collaboration and open source and all of that through the lens of accelerating a digital strategy in these times?
There's things that we take for granted that we need to be willing to kind of share as best practices here. And the acceleration isn't just, by acceleration, I'm not just talking about like kind of artificial, like machine learning or VR or accelerating that. I'm talking about some very, very fundamental things that we take for granted. Teaching people about Google Docs as a way of collaborating in real time. People aren't used to, our colleagues aren't used to working that way. Git. Can we is this an opportunity that we could kind of bring Git and those ideas about, pull requests to other areas? Can you imagine like collaborating on documents in new ways? Yale is an institution and is over 300 years old. The University of Paris, God, how old is the University of Paris? Centuries older than Yale. And what we did was we had this model where we were becoming the new kind of church, and you can see faculty are monks, and you come to the Yale campus, it has all this wonderful stonework and everything. And the center of campus is the library. And the library is kind of like this temple of sacred texts. And for the longest time, you would have to make like the pilgrimage, and you would have to go in and you would go into the stacks. You see Yale's library, the main center is a nave. It looks like a cathedral. It has this metaphor built into the architecture of the building itself. But today, when we're flooded with information, and information is so cheap, the research has to kind of change. That model needs to change. We've known that this has to change. That we have to kind of find ways to collaborate and bring stuff out and new ways to work together. It's not enough for researchers to say, I created a PDF, it's been peer reviewed, I stuck it in the stacks, that's all I have to do. We need to figure out ways of sharing that information.
Because that's the old model. The idea of I wrote a thing and I put it in the stacks, whether it's a manuscript or a PDF or a magazine or whatever, you put it in the stacks and it will be found because somebody will show up there and they'll look through the card catalog and they'll find the keyword that they're interested in, because knowledge up until pretty recently was expensive. You would go out of your way and you would put the time into research, and you could covet an individual article or think piece or research document. But these days, that's I'm sure there's statistics that say something along the lines of, I'm making this up, but it's probably true, that like there's more content produced in an hour than any person can consume in a lifetime, on YouTube and
we have Moore's law for information, right? The amount of data is what, doubling every 18 months now? So it's just absolutely it's absolutely incredible. And how and the universities have known that they've had to pivot for research, and now we have to help them because people physically can't go to the library. so now it's like
that's kind of like a last straw too, is that so we have Moore's law of information. It's doubling, all the time. It's cheap, it's easy to find, and now to top it all off, the very last straw is you can't physically go to the library to get it. It has to be digital. So it not only has to be digital so that it's searchable and can be more collaborative or whatever, it needs to be digital because you can't physically go to the place where it would have been otherwise. So this is the idea of accelerating on the research side. So a few moments ago, we were talking about very briefly about how everybody's really focused on like the classroom experience and how do you digitize or how do you make remote a classroom experience? But that's just one part of what universities do. That may be like the undergrad experience of university life, but the post-grad and PhD and doctoral and researcher level is research. And that's a major portion of especially schools like Yale and Stanford and the rest. So we're talking about really accelerating the research side of a university here.
So if you get serious conversations on a provostial level, or people who are very serious about the idea of the university, they will tell you that a university has a tripartite mission. All great universities have this, right? What makes something a university? It's the creation, it's the dissemination, and the archiving of knowledge, right? And we kind of conflate the technology that we have for the dissemination of knowledge. We get stuck in this historical anomaly where it's like 18 to 22-year-olds, we can bring them on here at campus and we'll kind of educate them there, because this is an interesting point in the career. They're not really there. They don't really have a family yet. They don't have responsibilities. So it's actually not like that's not the mission of the university to teach 18 to 22-year-olds. It's just that that's what the technology allowed. And the technology was like, we all have to kind of come to this physical campus. Those rules are gone, right? We could have lifelong learning, right? We could have people come in. And just like what happened after World War II, where the universities said, you know what, we're not just finishing schools, we're going to be the place that America does research. And we're going to kind of help invent things, like have partnerships with government and help kind of invent the internet. It was part of the great things of America. America does two things better than anybody else in the world. Let's talk, Yankee to Texan right now, right?
All right.
Two things that we do better than anybody else in the world, right? We do internet technology better, and we do higher education better than anybody else in the world, right? And now we're going to
bold.
and we it's true, no doubt about it. And we're going to now we have an opportunity, and it's our moment to kind of like look and push that a little bit further. And like much the same way that we did it after World War II, we said, okay, we're going to create the Modern Research Information University. Right now, we're going to kind of take this moment, and we're going to push for new ways to kind of collaborate and disseminate information. What is that? There's like, we're going to talk. I have a Yale shirt on right now. I'm at Yale, so I'll speak in a little Latin. What is that? What is that? Per adversia ad astra, right? From the struggle to the stars. That's what's going to happen right now. We're going to take this pandemic. We're going to find new ways of kind of collaborating together, and we're going to kind of take it to the next level, because we have planetary level crises right now. In addition to the pandemic, we have a global climate struggle, and this is let's take this moment to kind of figure out new ways to kind of bring this all thing together and say, research isn't just having that PDF. research is kind of us kind of coming together. So what do we do? Right, Todd? And I think this is kind of, I like the ideas that your team has been coming up with, because I pose this to your questions.
Okay.
Very practical. So let's bring it down.
Okay.
Live streaming.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know how to do this. You set this up on what, like Tuesday?
Yeah.
Monday you reached out to me, and we're having this kind of live stream right now. We need to teach the faculty and the researchers how to do this.
Mm.
We could teach them that. We need to have that integrated into the website. We kind of make it formless, and it has to be kind of agnostic. If they want to use Twitch, if they want to use Discord, if they want to use, Mixer, or if they want to use YouTube.
Yeah.
That's one very practical thing we could do. The second thing is that we need to we have to kind of expose the idea that, content is content. Content is, you think it's all this different things. You think you have this specialty. This is content, and you need to learn how to share and collaborate on content. And we could teach that, people. And the third thing that we need to do is, once you get everything, that content model in place, let's teach you how to really kind of understand the analytics behind that model. And let's teach people how to take advantage of machine learning and kind of find connections between things that didn't happen. Because another thing about that was antiquated about that library system is that library system made you put books. It said this belongs
in one place.
In one place, and this is the subject, or this belongs to the English department, and this belongs to the history department. And that distinction doesn't make sense. We could drop that distinction when we could use machine learning to kind of make connections, bring people together in new ways, spark new research, so we could solve different problems. And it's up to people like us to kind of do it, because no one else is going to come in. Like, the people who are, if you're watching this video, this is for you. Like, this is if you've made it to this conversation, you're getting this nerdy. Like, you have the obligation. You have the obligation to kind of take this seriously.
Mm-hmm. So let's. You were talking about the history of universities, and I want to come back to this because I wasn't aware of this, and I think that there's a really interesting. I think what you're getting at is that we are at a similar moment right now. So you are obviously well versed in the history of universities and higher education in the U.S., and I'm more of a participant in higher education. And
I love the
kind of on the so you said after World War II, there was an influx of people going to universities, and universities said, okay, we need to stop being finishing schools. We need to be places where people really go to learn and to advance whatever compulsory, base level education that they had walking in the door. I'm curious, from a historical perspective, was the driver of that the GI Bill?
A large part of it was kind of people returning, but the one that I want to talk about is the idea of the university as the center of research. That, I think, is an idea. A lot of people talk about the GI Bill and building Kwanzaa Hut on campus to kind of take in the influxer, and then we had the baby boom. But what we forget is that was an action that had to be taken to kind of say that science is going to be conducted at the university. And what does that mean? So, Yale, I could talk a little bit about Yale. Yale has always been a little deeply uncomfortable with science, and engineering. We had the Sheffield School, but we kind of downplayed it a little bit to our loss. We've always been the arts Ivy, and there is such a important role that but even Yale kind of came around to it and said, you know what, we need to be at this, we need to be there. And now Yale is really the center of neuroscience, right? We're doing incredible things in quantum physics. And that is because, we have these kind of government partnerships. We've made that pivot, but unfortunately, we've locked that information. We still are kind of locking that in our silos. As Yale, we call them not silos. We're not siloed. We have cylinders of excellence, right?
Hmm.
But we're locked in. We're not sharing that information.
Hmm.
And this is an opportunity because now everybody has to store their data and store their research digitally early, that maybe we could help people make those connections.
Got it. Okay. So we have this moment in higher education history after World War II. There's an influx of
Mhm,
people coming back from the war,
mhm,
and they want to study. And maybe they got a bit of a boost from
mhm,
this, GI Bill or whatever the reason, right? Universities shift from being a sort of a club and a finishing school and a networking opportunity, but it
mhm,
expands into also being a place of legitimate learning and research.
mhm,
Uh, it seems like there is a moment now that is perhaps on the same scale, and that is, you mentioned earlier
yes.
that there's sort of a schedule, or was maybe a schedule to the university life, which is you graduate high school, 18 to 22, you go to
Mhm,
undergrad, and either you're then off into
mhm,
the working world or you start to pursue some postgrad stuff or whatever.
mhm,
But you have this window of like universities are an 18 to 22-year-old's world, and then there's all the research that you do on top of
mhm,
it. But with the expansion now of, well, you don't have to, and that was possible because they were young.
mhm,
They are young.
mhm,
They can move in with a bunch of other people. They probably not in serious relationships. They probably don't have kids, right? They can go do these things. They can go on this grand 4, 5, 6 year adventure of
mhm,
undergrad experience. And they don't have debt yet. They
mhm.
will, but like they don't have that kind of debt, so they aren't really tied down by any of that. Um, but now because that like physical, like I'm going to go to the place and I'm
Mhm,
going to go to the classrooms and go to the labs and all of this, because that physical draw isn't there anymore, universities will have to start being able to offer these classes online, or in some other kind of remote way, which immediately expands it to, as you put it, lifelong learners. So now
mhm,
you have scalable, probably more affordable because
mhm,
of the scale and volume,
mhm,
education that doesn't require you to move to New Haven and
mhm,
live there
mhm,
and or commute
mhm,
every day. You have these lifelong learners. This is like a turning point, or maybe an acceleration point for higher ed to
mhm.
greatly expand, to reduce its cost to the student. uh, what else do you see happening in this inflection point where we're now starting to rethink what education means, what research means, because of the limitations that a pandemic has put on us?
We are going to reinvent the the symposium, and our kind of gathering of scholars is going to be reinvented. There's been a lot of barriers of entry, of participation in in kind of some of the research worlds, where it isn't kind of the best ideas that are going to get out there, but it's a little bit of a, were you able to attend this event, and then you
Mm.
had to be there in person to kind of get there. And that's not best for science, that's not best for arts research, that's not best, that is not, it makes our subjects a little bit insular, and kind and it, we don't, you know, they think of themselves, scholars don't become these monks, they become these hermits, right, that aren't engaged and kind of get lost in their own world. I think what you're going to see now is, if we take these symposium and conferences online, like we kind of make sure that they're all videotaped, we kind of get the papers presented are put in a PDF forms, we're going to kind of make it much more accessible to a broader reach of scholarship. So more and more people are going to be able to kind of participate in the cutting edge, right?
Mm.
And this is the thing that we've done, and this is, again, this is stuff that we solved in open source.
Yeah.
When this is, I had, I had the privilege of being at uh, uh, Avomatic in 2006, where we were and working with Neil Drummond, maintaining of 5.0 of Drupal. It
Mhm.
was much harder, right? We couldn't scale to the size we are today without kind of Git. And our open source approaches of like kind of expanding the field of participation. These values that we have to kind of bring them, and then we can't be ashamed of it, because open source software works. It's powering the world, and this is not a fantasy that you could have. How many people contribute to the Linux projects, right? How many people contribute to Drupal? You know, and why can't we do this for other areas of inquiry? And we should take this opportunity to open things up and bring our values and stand by them. So that's going to be the impact.
And this isn't and I think that your like thesis statement here is that this is not a change in direction. This is simply, we knew and we've known for decades that this is what education is ultimately going to look like. And this is an opportunity to just go there now, not to wait 5 or 10 or 20 years, but let's just do it now, because we are being forced to. There are certain things that we took as granted or taken as holy that have now been torn down, that are no longer relevant. Things like you have to be physically in a classroom, you have to physically go to a conference or a symposium to learn this. That's gone because we can't do that. It's not safe. So now we need to drive through the wall and enact these plans and these visions that we've had for years and years.
Yeah, and the open source web development, and people need to remember, the open source web development world we won because in the fallout of the first .com boom, we said, guess what? We could do this, and the software is free. And back then, everybody's like, no, free software couldn't work. It needs to be proprietary. And we said, no, this is working. And so our infrastructure is there now. There's excellent quality hosting out there with Pantheon and Acquia, and you could host your own, like Varnish exists, right? CDNs exist. Like so many of the questions our websites don't go down anymore, right? And the infrastructure is kind of free, and then there's a moat, and other people aren't going to catch up to us. So don't be afraid of this kind of level of austerity that's coming in. Double down. Say, you know what? We have the software there. We just need to have the people to kind of help us implement it, and that's it. And that it's not going to some software licensing rent. We're just going to have to pay for the people to help us get us there. And if you give us that little kind of amount of money, the rate of return that you're going to get, the impact that we're going to have, the transformation that we're going to create across the university, it's difficult to overstate it.
So we're coming up in about half an hour here, which I think is just about the right amount of time. But we're just starting to land on an interesting idea, and maybe this is a conversation for another episode. But I have to be a challenging voice for a moment. I have to be the voice for the other people in higher ed who are like, yeah, but I'm not Yale. So I'm not Yale. How do I afford to do what you're talking about? How do I make do today? How can I accelerate without having to make a capital expenditure investment on my digital strategy and infrastructure?
Join us. We're not competing with you. We're the code and the techniques and the modules and the practices that we develop, we want to kind of share. Anything that you could the very fact, if you use it and you submit bug reports, that's a value. If the open source model is not like I have mine and that you get yours. It's the idea is that many eyes make all bugs shallow. The more participants that we have, the stronger the network effect is. So if join us. We're not here to kind of create a gatekeeping. We're here to kind of advance this. Look, I'm in this because I want to advance the human project of knowledge. And so many people are attracted to higher ed and universities. We have the same values. So let's create a consortia. Let's kind of figure out how to kind of coordinate our efforts and work together.
How can people get a hold of you?
You can find me on Twitter at Franz Hartl or you could also email me at franz.hartl, FRANZ.HARTL at yale.edu.
Great. Let's leave it at that, and maybe we will get together again in the near future and expand on some of these ideas. Thank you very much, Franz. So Making Do is brought to you by 4Kitchens. We make big websites. You can check out our blog for more information on this topic and to see a recorded version of this live stream as well. You can follow us on Twitter at 4Kitchens. We will see you again next week. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Be well.